This is a channel where I talk about stuff, and over these past 10 months now, there's been well over 24 hours of just words coming out of my mouth. And I've had a couple of videos where I talk about the limits of words. And so now I will once again use words to talk about the limits of words. I mean, you see here so many words. I mean, you look behind me, we have books full of words. And, well, I'm not going to stand here and use words to talk about how, words are useless. Of course, we use words to send messages that can have, hopefully, some useful content in them. But the more I say words out of my mouth, the more I hear words in my ear and read them, the more I see the limitation of these words. Maybe it's really a matter of overexposure. There's just too much talking. And I am aware of how silly it is for me to talk about how there's too much talking. If I really believed it, why don't I just shut up? Valid point. But the idea is to see the limits of where words can get us. There's only so much that we really need them, I think. If we have too many words, then past a certain point, it becomes filling our heads with noise, filling our heads with extra stuff. It becomes clutter. Each word is like an object, maybe even each sentence. You could see it like that is a constructed object, and we are consuming it by listening to it, by adding it somehow to our memory, to the structures in our mind of how we see the world, adding new information. And it's just loading up and loading up. Now imagine taking the ideas of simplicity and minimalism and applying them to even the information in our minds. Now, don't usually hear about how it's good to know nothing. I'm a minimalist of knowledge. I know nothing. I know very little. I don't want to learn anything. Because it's great to learn things. But there's a capacity that we can learn a little bit at a time. But if we try to just constantly consume information, it becomes an overload that leads to us really having less in the end, because it's just too much being loaded in. So the idea that I'm playing with now is, instead of studying more information and consume more knowledge, to spend some of that time instead of listening to information, listening to lectures and news and all kinds of knowledge, trying to get more knowledge, instead spend some of that time just listening to music. Now music, there's still words often, it's still information being conveyed, but it's of a very different quality than words and sentences being spoken to us to add information. There's something kind of endless about music that it doesn't really add to our knowledge structure in the same way. It's a different way of looking at information And music is all about these loops where we are experiencing something rather than adding on to a structure. The song is complete in itself, and we experience the moment through the song, not as a piece of a big knowledge structure that we are building by, getting some information about a particular topic. So there's a certain simplicity that comes, even if the song is full of words, there's a certain kind of standalone simplicity that comes from listening to music that it seems like a lot of us, and especially me, that I love to fill my head with information and knowledge, there's a value in forgetting about that, not trying to always add to this knowledge structure, and just in an almost empty way, experiencing the moment and letting the moment be complete. No reference to any other structure, no building of this knowledge castle, but simply experiencing that moment for what it is. Less words, more music.